Good evening, NNJR. I'm Shannon Muller. Thanks for joining us tonight. With us, we have Rudy and Nancy Samsel to speak about membership, new members and membership. Janice and Ken Ernstine, Janice being the fancy prez that we have, and Ken, her wonderful sidekick. And we have Lou Huddyman, who's going to help moderate the conversation with Parker. Thank you, Parker, for joining us. I really appreciate your time. We're excited to have you here. So as we get started, how about you give us an update, Rudy and Nancy? Great to see you.
Sure. You want to start?
You can start.
Okay.
Tell them how many members and all that.
So, well, welcome everyone. Glad to be on, and can't believe we're already coming to the end of summer here, but hope you're enjoying it and enjoying the hot weather, and had minimal damage from Henri. So with summer coming to a close, Nancy and I have been working with Peter Schneider, and we're looking to have our next new member gathering up in Sussex County, up where Janice and Ken are, right? So more to come on that, but Saturday, October 2nd is when we're going to have that in the morning. And Peter has promised one of his good rallies. If you're so inclined to want to take that afterwards, it'll be a nice ride up through some, what I know are some great roads up Ken and Janice's way. And I believe it's to a nice ice cream shop. So maybe you can.
And there's a farmer's market right next door, I hear.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. And if you haven't done so already, reach out to Nancy for your new member shirt. Right, if you want.
I reach out to them.
Yeah, you reach out to them and do that. And yeah, so the good news is I just put out a report. You'll see it in the next Porsche for us. That we're up 14% year over year on new members. You'll see the graph just keeps growing and growing. It's up, coming close to the 2,400 mark for primary members, and with family members included in that, we're up around 3,700 if memory serves me right. So one of the larger clubs in the Porsche family, and but it never feels like that, whatever you depend on activity you want to do. So I don't know, anything to add to that?
That's it.
Okay, so
well, congratulations. Nancy's a
Thank
new
you.
grandmother again, so congratulations, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for all the things that you guys do. Really appreciate all that, and I hope to get to see you both soon.
yeah, likewise.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. All right, Ken and Janice, you are up. Tell us the Parker Thompson story.
Hey, Parker, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Janice?
Very good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
So Ken and I first met Parker at Sebring, and we were there for an event that was ending on a Sunday afternoon, and all day the big trucks from Porsche North America were rolling in with all these brand new 992 GT3s, and they were unloading them, and they still had papers taped to the windows. And we were strolling around the paddock and looking at them, and we were with Eric Filgaris, who is a pro race car driver that we've been working with, and many of our members know Eric because he's been our guest coach at the Glen for the past 2 years for our solo event in September. And so he and Parker are old buddies, and or well, not old buddies, but they're friends. And
yeah, I mean, they're not, they're barely drinking age.
But Eric introduced us, and we got to meet Parker when he was first seeing the car for the first time, I think.
Yeah.
Well, you nailed it. I didn't know if you had known that, but that was literally the first time I saw my race car for this year. So I was sitting in it. The team was just unloading the truck. And I showed up at the track, and I didn't even say hi to him yet. I just went right to the car, sat in it, got to know it a little bit before I went and saw the team. So, and then lo and behold, you two were there.
Yeah, and Parker was very generous with his time and talked to us about the new car, and got behind the wheel and was all excited about the opportunity to drive it. I just wanted to mention a couple of things about the Carrera Cup races. Parker he's number 3 right now, I think, in third place in point standings for the Carrera Cup. And that's terrific. He was in the top 5 in the 2 races at Sebring. And then the next event at Coda, he took P1 in one of the races. And then at Watkins Glen, adjusting to new tires and everything else. And I think was in 6th and 7th, I think, those 2 races.
Yep.
The JDX racing team and everybody really rallied around, and including Parker, and they came back roaring at Road America. And Parker took P2 in the first race and P1 in the second race. And I just got to say, if you guys haven't seen that second race on Sunday morning, you got to go back and look at it. Just go to IMSA.com. They went into turn 1 3 wide with Parker on the outside, and Janice and I are going, no. Took the long way around and somehow ended up coming out in between the grass and the track and ended up in first place.
So Parker, we really couldn't see that from the camera angle. So you'll have to tell us about how that happened, because we saw the 3 wide going in, and then the next shot is you in first place. And so.
Well, and I wish you could have been there for pre-race strategy, because both my engineer, everybody was on the same page that I would not try to go around the outside in turn 1. Everybody said it was a bad idea, including myself. I agreed. I'm like, yeah, that's not a good thing. But it was funny because the pole sitter was so worried about keeping me pinned on the outside that he kind of forgot about third place. And third place was on the inside of both of us. So once I saw that, I'm like, there's no tucking in, and I'll be back in 5th if I try and get to the inside. So I went to the outside. Sometimes it works.
And then you withstood 2 restarts after cautions. And there was more excitement in that 45-minute race than the entire 24 hours of Le Mans this past weekend. Except when the guy almost got run over throwing the checker at the end of the race.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
Other than that, it was 45 minutes back. So go back and look at that. It's really exciting as hell.
I appreciate that. So no, good race. It was good. As you probably noticed, we found some stuff on the car. We can start talking about that. I know Lou has probably got quite a few questions for me tonight. So wherever you guys want to start, I'm good. But it was good to get that win and get the momentum back in our favor. We've got September 9th through 11th. Indianapolis is our next race. That's going to be a big one. So they've shortened our season. So we've got a triple header at Indianapolis GP, and we've got a triple header at Road Atlanta, our finale. So
I didn't realize that. Great.
Oh, wow.
Believe it or not, we're only halfway through the year. It feels like the year's over calendar wise, but with IMSA shifting their schedule, our championship is exactly at the halfway point. So lots of points to play for.
Oh, wow.
So.
All right, then.
That's great. Parker, I was looking at your bio, and I just have to, I have to give it to the audience. 142 races in your pro career, 50% of which you were on the podium for, which is an outstanding record, unbelievable, right? And then 22% win rate. Like, that's astounding. At your age of just a fresh 16 years old, it's really amazing. No, I'm just kidding.
I was started when I was 16.
Wait a minute.
But
no, you're good.
I mean, just, it's amazing, your accomplishments. Indy Pro 2000, Carrera Cup North America, Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge, US and Canada, Canadian Touring Car Champion, first place. So your resume, speaks for itself. So it's just amazing. So when they asked me to do the interview tonight, I'm like, yeah, please. Can I talk to this guy, please? So my first question, how did you get started in racing? Like, I know everyone starts in karts and all that, but how did it really start? Like, what was the driving force behind you getting into racing?
So didn't start in karts, actually. So my dad was a bike racer. He raced Grand Prix bikes in Canada. So our premier level moto bikes that raced at Mossport, or what is now formerly Mossport. Now it's Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. And then on the West Coast, we had Greg Moore, and then Race City in Calgary. or 2 tracks on the West Coast. So he made a run at being a professional bike racer, raced dirt bikes, and then actually ended up in jet boats. So jet boats in North America is a little different. There's 2 types of jet boats. There's the drag jet boats, which are just on a lake. And then there's actually the river jet boats, which race. The 4 countries that switched the world championship with river jet boat racing are Canada, US, Mexico, and then actually New Zealand, believe it or not, are the 4 countries that every year the world championship rotates. So my dad in 2003 was the riverboat jet boat world champion. So when I was growing up, I was born in 1998. So literally age 5, 6, 7, my formative years in motorsport were watching my dad race on a river.
That's amazing. That is really amazing. So how do you go from that to bikes and then karts and then cars? Like, how did that all happen?
Well, it got to that point of like when I could start to hold conversations when I was younger. I was very blunt and started asking how I could race. And my dad knew that was coming. I'm sure he was happy to hear that. Mom, probably not so much, because she went through it with my dad, and she thought as he was starting to retire out of it, maybe she could dodge a bullet and not have her only son in racing. But right away, 5, 6, 7, I was asking for it. So age 5, I got my first dirt bike. It was a Yamaha PW50. It's like the most known child motorcycle, the little yellow Yamaha PW50. And it took 2 weeks for my mom to sell that out from under my dad and I. And so my dirt bike was gone. She said, "You are not racing dirt bikes. I'm not letting my son go down that path." And I had to wait till I was 8 years old in Canada before I could get a go-kart. That was the first step, the age level that you needed to drive a go-kart. So I started out, originally I'm from Red Deer, Alberta. I know a lot of people look sideways at that. It is a place, Red Deer, Alberta. If you know hockey, the Red Deer Rebels are a junior team in the WHL, and that is where I'm from. So it's a city of about 100,000 people, and it's right in between Calgary and Edmonton, the 2 big cities in Alberta, the province of Canada, where I'm from. So we started out in Calgary. So every weekend we would drive about an hour and a half, hour 45 one way to go race go-karts. And my dad was my mechanic out of the back of the half ton. And the rest is history. I mean, from the very first day I got behind the wheel of a go-kart, I looked my dad straight in the face and said, "I found it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life." So
It's amazing.
yeah, it's interesting.
Did I read that you were 3rd in the world at one point as a junior in go-karting?
Yes. So yeah, in the world. So I was lucky at the time I was coming up, and go-karting's still similar, but especially I want to say late 2000s, early 2010s. Go-karting was at a stage where everybody was racing for what was called a Rotax and the Rotax World Finals. That was kind of the premier where everybody looked for the talent. And every region of the US and Canada, well, generally your country, if you won what was called their premier championship for Rotax, Rotax would give you a ticket to the world championship. So the ticket, you still had to fund yourself over there, but once you got over there, you had a cart for the weekend, all your tires, everything was paid for. You just had to get yourself to the world finals. And it was everybody had the same cart manufacturer. So it was kind of interesting, their view on how they ran the world championship. It wasn't like, national events. It's very much like Porsche Carrera Cup, where everybody got the same chassis, car, the same engine, and the same tires. And they went out and did battle for a week. So in I want to get my years right. I believe it was 2011. I was the youngest ever competitor for the junior category of that event. And that was in Dubai. And then in 2012 is when I was 3rd in the world in Portugal. And that was at that same event, which I believe I was 13 years old when that all happened. So kind of, interesting.
You were a prodigy.
Yes and no. Motorsports is, I'm sure you'll get a common theme as we go through it, but it is a tough sport to come up in.
Absolutely.
I would say for Canada, I was definitely the up and coming prodigy, but we can only race 4 months out of the year. So
I wanted to ask you about that. Like what the competition's like in Canada, and do you have to come to the States or go to Europe for like more if you're that good, like you're always on top, like you wanted to push yourself, right?
Well, it gets to the point, I guess the best term would be, you can be a big fish in a small pond, but that doesn't get you on the map for, motorsports and competition. If you want to move to cars, I think you either have to be a well-known entity in the US or in Europe in order to get those kind of opportunities. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, once I started winning in Canada, it was kind of just a matter of time before I needed to make the jump to the US in order to try and get my name on the map somehow and get IndyCar team owners and sports car team owners to know who I was. And then even then, I have to say this, my dad's background in motorsport kind of caught us off guard. And what I mean by that is dirt bikes is a lot different than motorsport. When I say motorsport, I'm specifically referring to four wheels.
Sure.
Dirt bike racing is very manufacturer driven. And I'm not saying motorsports isn't manufacturer driven or sports cars or formula cars isn't, but dirt bike racing, not to say my dad wasn't a good dirt bike racer, but right away he got contracts and got a lot of his racing paid for. And it seems like the formula car side of things, especially the way I grew up, that was not the case. It was very much a grind in order to get my foot in the door. And just because you were, ranked third in the world, and even after the first couple of years in cars that I had, where I was a known entity, team owners knew who I was. It wasn't like team owners were calling saying, "Hey, can you come drive for us?
Right.
We'll pay you, or we'll pay for your racing." It was very much, what can you do off the track to benefit us financially? And oh, great, you're a good race car driver. That's an awesome benefit.
Yeah, you have to be a marketable entity, don't you?
Yeah.
So it doesn't hurt that you kind of look like a young, I would say you almost look like Elon Musk. I imagine Elon Musk when he was 20 years old. That's you. You're like a real life, like Elon Musk, but when he was 20 or something.
Well, hey, I'll take that any day. Honestly, if I had Elon Musk's brain, I might be in Formula One.
So let me ask you, tell me the difference between when you're in karting, you're third in the world, and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. That jump from open wheel to a closed wheel car, or, you didn't do it from karts. Maybe you did it from like Indy Lights or your 1600 Indy car series, but that jump from open wheel cars to sports cars, like talk to us about like what that's like, what the differences are, like how you adjust and things like that as a driver.
That's a great question. And I don't think enough people talk about this particular step. So I'll explain it by telling you the mistake that I made. I wouldn't necessarily say, I think my father was going to try and support whatever decision I made as I jumped to cars. But being as good as I was in karts, I thought that the car thing was just going to come really easy. And I would say almost every premier go-kart driver goes into cars with the same thought. It's still got four wheels. It's still got a motor. I can drive this fast. And I could. That wasn't the issue. I could get in anything, even when I was, 15, 16, 17 years old, and my raw talent was still there. I could still put a lap together, but it was when all the things weren't right. I didn't know how to set the car up. I didn't know how to give feedback. I didn't know how to handle adverse situations. Racecraft was a lot different. So all those things added up. I'll tell you the mistake I made. And the mistake I made was I went from go-karting. I took a year off to kind of make the decision on where I would go in cars, and then went right to USF 2000, which is the premier open wheel championship in North America. Not many people try and do that. And then the second mistake I made, and not a mistake, but I went in with a team that it was my only option. I didn't have a ton of budget that first year, so I couldn't afford one of the premier teams, but I went in with a team with limited testing with, it's not like they had a bunch of setups already ready to go. I had no teammate. It was just a tough year right off the bat. I still finished fifth out of, some really good competition. Nico Jameen won that year, which if you're watching the Le Mans 24 hour, he's in Le Mans. So it had some very good competition. Aaron Tielitz, who drives for Vassar Sullivan in GTD with the Lexus, he finished second. So some heavyweight guys in my first year, and I wasn't really putting myself in a winning position. And then the second thing I want to say on that, and the reason why I call it a mistake, is it's not because I went with the wrong team. I really think I should have went to 1600 my first year. So you'll actually notice that I started 1600 about halfway through the first year I was doing USF 2000. I got an opportunity to run with a Canadian team called Exclusive Autosport, who, if we go through my career, you'll find was a huge help to the reason I got to where I am right now. But halfway through that year, I think the team had doubt in me as if I was driving the car correctly. I didn't understand the difference between mechanical balance and aerodynamic balance. And it's not that I didn't understand it. It's just, it's really tough to know exactly what a car can do until you take the wings off it and you know what it can do without the wings. And then once you understand the wings, you can get ahead of the car. So I went and did, I believe, 4 races in 1600 that year, Mount Tremblant and ICAR, which are 2 circuits in Canada. I won all the races I competed in 1600 right off the bat. So it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't for a lack of, not being good enough. It was just a lack of not understanding my situations that first year. So I would say for anybody making to look that jump out of karts to cars, you have to understand mechanical balance before you get in anything with wings on it, because it'll pay dividends your whole career.
Yeah. Talk to me about, so it's interesting because it doesn't sound like you actually had to change the way you drove when you went from open wheel to sports cars. Is there was there something in your routine that you changed prior to going on a track, or, did you practice something different in sports cars? Did you do different simulators? Talk to us about a little bit of that.
And you're talking from the move from karts to cars, or we?
Yeah.
Okay. Believe it or not, right when I got in a car, super comfortable. So the first car I'd ever driven, to get my license in order to have a USF 2000 test, I needed to get an SCCA license, and I did it through Bondurant in their 3-day school. So I went, and the first time I ever drove a car was a Corvette with a H pattern. And then the first time I ever drove a Formula car was their Bondurant, their old school Formula Mazda H pattern 4 bangers, or 4 gears, rotary. Right away was super comfortable. Like, that was never an issue. I'm, even in my karting days, maximizing the brakes for me was always a huge part of the way I like to drive the car. Like, I believe to this day that braking is the single most important thing behind the wheel. And that's what separates the best guys from the medium guys from the elementary guys, is just your brakes and maybe throttle. But honestly, I think braking alone is what does it for me. Anybody can turn the wheel. Anybody can touch the throttle when they need to, when they slow down too much. But understanding how not to slow down or when to slow down, the difference is the key in order to get a lap time out of the car. And it literally, it can change your whole style depending on how you set the pitch, right? Especially now that I'm in sports cars. I mean, I could talk to you for hours about braking theory and all that, but I'll keep it short and say that my braking style in karts, I just kind of tweaked for cars. And the only thing you got to tweak is in karts, it's on or off. You still hit it really hard. And it's funny because in karts, I was so aggressive anyway, I would bend the brake pedal in karting. It would have to be reinforced because I love to hit it so hard. So when I got to cars, that was never an issue. I never had to hit it harder. I had to learn how there's just an extra probably 2 or 3 seconds in the brake zone of you actually coming off the pedal. And whether the difference of you trailing versus not trailing is a huge difference in car balance. And understanding that is what I kind of had to tweak. So once I understood how to brake the car, once I got the downshifting right, because it's funny, I'll say it'll be a good joke for everybody. Back in my day, which is probably everybody's day in this chat, you actually had to blip and you actually had to clutch for downshifts.
No.
Which is hilarious to think.
There's no paddles?
No. So when
There's
I started
button
out,
that says auto blip. I have a button in my car that says auto blip.
So all the cars I started out in were all manual, right?
That's
like
amazing.
1600 was, I had to clutch. So it's kind of funny to think, right? I mean, you think to compare it to people who aren't in racing, I say that my generation in Canada, at least, I'm not sure for the US, but in Canada, I was the last grade to have to learn cursive writing. So it's almost like this long forgotten art of,
Right.
and that changes your brake style a lot too. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of wild to think that 15, 16 and 17-year-old Parker had to learn how to brake. And it was a different type of brake because you had to get your downshifts in, right? So you actually, it wasn't about maximizing the brake zone like we would in a Carrera Cup car with ABS and paddles and all the fancy stuff where you go to the 2 board and hope for the best. It was very much like, okay, I've got to not grind the dogs. I've got to make sure that everything's good. And obviously if you miss a shift, it gets the car upset and that messes up the whole corner. So it's, back then when I was just learning, it wasn't just about braking deep. It was also about some elegant style. But now that's changed. So what's really interesting, and I think I've always been really aware, this might be a pro, it might be a con in my career, but I've always been really aware of what the car does and what I do to the car, because essentially you're just an extension of a variable. How you drive is just creating the car doing something, right? With every action, there's a reaction. That is you in the seat. The biggest thing you can change on the race car is how you drive it. I can make a car push, I can make a car get loose, and that's the big thing I stress in coaching. So when you ask, what's my rhythm for switching and going back between these styles, 2019, I drove 4 different series with 4 different cars, which
One
was
year.
a lot. It was over 40 races, I believe, that year, just in 1 year. And a lot of those races, I'll give the example, the Toronto Indy, Streets of Toronto, was the IndyCar weekend. So I was driving Indy Pro 2000, which is one of the premier Road to Indy series. And then I was driving Porsche Challenge Canada. And I would literally run from pit lane to pit lane. Like our sessions were back to back. I had to jump out of a Formula car and jump into a Cup car, the 991.2. So when we talk about reset, I would close my eyes for 30 seconds and go, okay, complete reset. I'd have to go through all my brake boards again before I went out because it's completely different. I mean, an Indy Pro, you're braking at the 2 board. Carrera, Porsche, that style Cup car, the 991.2 had no ABS. So you're braking maybe at the 4 board and qualifying, most likely the 5 board, which there wasn't even a 5 board. You just had to, to judge it. And then one of the single biggest things was obviously sports cars offset left-hand drive and Formula cars not. So all of a sudden, you're in a concrete jungle. It's, Streets of Toronto is one of the toughest street courses, I think, in North America, with the bumps and then the concrete walls. And, on one side of the car, you think you're scraping the mirror. And then on the other side of the car, you're actually scraping the mirror, but it's a couple feet.
Incredible.
So the biggest thing you do, I guess, is it's just that reset. I think I have a good adaptability that's helped my career out a lot. And that's why I've got a lot of opportunities, is because I can generally jump in something and figure it out quick. But when you have to do it that quick, the easiest way to do it is, and I know everybody in this chat has probably heard about it, but it's to take that 30 seconds to a minute and go through the track in your head in your own quiet time and figure out what you want to do before you go out and do it.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds silly, but I can guarantee you every professional driver does it, whether they're switching cars or not. We all do that.
So that's part of your routine, huh? Because
Yeah.
we were getting some chat questions about, what's Parker's routine prior to going on track. It's mental preparation, is it simulation, is it, just visualization? Like, what are all those steps that you go through?
Well, I guess we'll start with why I was almost late to this meeting, which is training 6 days a week. So I do not miss a gym session. Now that is when you're competing, obviously, I'm racing at the pinnacle of Porsche Carrera Cup and going for a championship, but general driver fitness, I think, is important for anybody who wants to track day in a car. It's physical, and don't let anybody talk you out of that. There's a reason why, you look at why Senna was so good. I could get into that too, but he was really, before his time, the first guy that took racing serious and wasn't drinking, wasn't smoking, and was working out. So I think that separated him a lot in his generation, right? I think he had a lot more fitness. And back then, those cars were incredibly hard to drive. And those guys are just gladiators. How Hunt drove a car back then, I'm not sure, but that's a whole nother story. Now, the modern day race car driver, and really anybody who wants to go track driving, the way I view it is, if you have to think about hanging on, you're not thinking about driving. So layman's terms, if at any time you are too tired to drive, you're not thinking about how to go faster, you're thinking about how to survive. And that generally doesn't go fast. So you've got to train a lot. So 6 days a week. I live in Indianapolis now. I've made the move. So that is where I am, is my apartment in Indianapolis. And I train with somebody you may have heard before. They're called Pit Fit. really cool. They've got online classes. So if it's ever something where, I'll be honest, I've trained by myself almost all the way up until now. I've had different people give me advice with personal training, and I've had personal trainers on a very, let's call it monthly basis, where you see a guy once, he gives you a program and you do it. But I've never had somebody one-on-one all the time training me for driving race cars. And I have to say that has made a huge difference this year. Getting into that topic, I don't mind giving away secrets. I wear this little band here. It's called a Whoop band, but there's plenty of other different stuff out there that tracks it. But tracking your recovery, how you train, and your sleep. I can't stress enough how important sleep is. And take this from a guy who I thought I could get 7 hours of sleep every day and be fine. And it's just sleep. I can drive a race car. And I was under the mentality too that, sleep when you're dead, the more hours awake, the better. No, not the case. I can tell you right now, now that I do love data on a race car, but now I've got data as a human, it's pretty unreal when you look at your bad days and then you go back and look at your phone and it tells you that, well, you only got 7 hours of sleep. So there's a reason that you had a bad day. So stuff like that, it's actually, when you talk about my preparation, I don't think it's really much more advanced than what anybody else is doing. Anybody that's taking a sport serious, but it's
Sure.
just it's doing the little stuff right. It's making sure you're fit for your program, right? I don't need to be a weightlifter. I'm strong, but I'm trying to drive a race car. I'm not trying to go to the Olympics and lift 500 pounds. So training specifically for that, getting the right sleep, and then doing the mental training, which is as simple as it sounds. It's not rocket science that way. I'll give you an inkling into how I approach it, but essentially every session, after every session, there's a debrief that I'll have with my engineer that can last, if it's good, 30 minutes. Let's just do some tweaks to the car. If it's a bad session, it can last hour plus. But at the end of that, he has objectives of what he wants to change on the car, and I have objectives in what I need to change in my driving. And it doesn't matter if I won. It doesn't matter if I qualified on pole. It doesn't matter if I qualified 10th. I do the same thing every time. And I give myself 3 things to change the next session. 3 things. And it's that mentality of you're just trying to get, I know everybody here's probably heard about the 1% better. If you get 1% better every day, all of a sudden you're 365% better every year. It adds up, right? It's those little things. So like I said, I give myself 3 things every time I go out, and that's the same way I coach. And I think that's why coaching is fairly natural for me, is because I do the same thing. I hold myself to the same regard and eat my own medicine just as I would as if I was coaching. And that generally, I find over 3 things, you're going to forget and you're not going to do it. But if you start with the biggest thing you want to accomplish, the second, and then the third, you can generally get through all 3 of them every time you're on track. And it's amazing the progress you can make as a driver. And then I hold my engineer to that too. He's got his kind of 3 things. I'm not going to say it's 3 every time, but he's got his things he works on. And at the end of the day, you combine that and all of a sudden, you find the magic that puts you on pole.
Yeah. Let's talk about, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's
Sure.
talk about your favorite track, because everyone in the club wants to know. You've been all over the world, right? You've raced on a ton of tracks. You're Canadian, so I think I know what track you're going to say, and I might throw up in my mouth a little, but that's okay. So talk about your favorite racetrack and why it's your favorite.
Don't let me forget. I want to loop back to the one that you think it is, because it's not a track in Canada.
Oh, thank God.
Yep, you're good. Although I think probably one of the most underrated tracks in North America is Mount Tremblant. And I don't know if that was the one you were referring to. Okay. Not a lot of people now, New Jersey, I can understand that where Mount Tremblant is. Not a lot of people that track know where Mount Tremblant is or how it is. So cool. It's not my favorite though.
Okay.
It's cool because I've got to run a lot of tracks this year that I normally wouldn't run in the US because of the fact I'm not with the Road to Indy and IndyCar, and I'm over with the sports car and IMSA. So I've got to test a few new tracks. A longtime favorite of mine, I'm a little biased. I like tracks that I'm naturally good at. And Barber Motorsports Park, I have won and wheeled in almost every car that I've ever competed there. I've got the track record in Indy Pro. I had the track record in USF 2000. And it's just one of those tracks. It's a motorcycle track. I know it's tough to pass on, but it's so flowy and it's got the elevation of like a Laguna Seca, where you have to have references that aren't on the track, that are in the sky, they're trees. And then it's just got this rhythm. If you put a lap together at Barber Motorsports Park, you can put a lap together everywhere, anywhere. I stand by that. So that's definitely one of my favorites. But then this year, getting to run on Coda was really cool. It's just so for the reasons I love Barber, I originally hated Coda, but then I learned to love Coda, which is just to try and get into a rhythm at Circuit of the Americas it's impossible.
It looks
It's
hard.
well,
Yeah.
it's you go from like these awkward brake zones and awkward angles, but what I fell in love with it was the amount of lines and creations you could do. Like I have to say that race, I believe it was race 1 at Coda. I might be biased because I won it, but that's not why I'm bringing it up. Why I'm bringing it up is it was half wet, half dry. Go back and look at all the different lines that guys were using and still producing relatively the same lap time. And that is just so cool for me. So tracks where you can be creative with lines are generally the ones I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer to that is, Sebring was cool. I really like Sebring, and I haven't, with the IndyCar stuff, we always tested at the short track. So I knew the carousel really well. I knew the hairpin really well. I knew Water Tower, but I never got to see any of the rest of the track, 15, 16, 17 is the hardest, I argue the hardest corner I've ever faced in North America. And then you back that up with 1, which is probably the second hardest corner I've ever faced in North America. And you have an unreal track. And I never really got to test there before we just showed up and went racing. So
Wow.
Sebring is the most characteristic. I'll give it the win. So those are my 3. You
All
got
right.
my 3, which are
All right. Now I'm gonna get it. We got to get into cars because this is a car club. So let's talk about cars. So the first question I want to ask is your favorite race car, and then your favorite street car that you've driven on a racetrack.
okay. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So I'll do favorite race car that I've driven, because that kind of makes the most sense, I guess. I can look at a DPI and say that would be pretty cool to drive. I'm sure it's fast. Haven't had the pleasure of driving one. And I know this might sound biased. It's not just because I'm with Porsche or a Porsche Junior, but this new 992 Cup car has been an absolute blast. I'll give you some background. We struggled with setting it up this year, and actually Ken brought it up at the start of the meeting. He had said the new tires at Watkins Glen. So what they did actually is, after we won at Coda, headed to Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen is the most energy for tires tracks in North America. It generates the most sidewall energy. It generates the most braking energy. A lot of tire failures happen at Watkins Glen. I think I might have said Road America, but Watkins Glen. So Michelin had some concerns about possibly the tire lasting the race. So what they wound up and went and did was they put new rear tires with essentially a more stiff sidewall on the car. And we had no testing on the new tires when we showed up to Watkins Glen, and it was a tough weekend. But even before then, we had just struggled to find the little things that make this car go. And I have to say, for everybody in this chat, and this is actually goes back to the very first thing I said about my car career, which is I'm confident I can get in anything and just drive it. But it's getting the car fine-tuned to the way it needs to be, and then driving becomes relatively easy. And we didn't have the right setup on the car for most of this season, and it's been a bit of a struggle. Road America, we got a 1-day test before we had to go race there, and my engineer and I found some stuff literally, and this goes to show you cannot give up on a test day. It was the last 2 runs of the day. It was a tough test day, like one of the toughest test days I had ever had, up until literally 4 o'clock. Track closes at 5 o'clock. We found 2 things in the car that were light years ahead of anything we'd ever found. And it just made our whole setup work. And you'll find there's changes on a car that sometimes bring a setup to life. There's some setups, some changes overpower a setup. It gets past just ride height, cambers, toes. It gets into more of like the car every car has a way it needs to be baselined, and then you can have driver characteristics and styles dictate where a setup goes. But we found what we were looking for, and that backed it up. You know, you can always say you found what you were looking for, but literally in testing, we were second in practice at Road America. And then if our qualifying didn't get canceled, I think we would have been on pole, at least for one of the races, because they do first and second fastest lap sets the grid for race 1 and race 2. And then we went out and won race 2, which was awesome. You know, Ken touched on it. We have worked really hard to try and find that one little thing. And it's amazing. I can't say it because I'm sure some competitors are probably going to go on here, but it's amazing how little things just add up, and we found it. And
All right.
my
We'll pay you,
whole
we'll pay you
long-winded-
privately after to tell us the secret, because I want to buy a
Perfect.
992 and set it up. Okay.
My long way of saying this, though, Lou, is the reason I brought this setup change up is originally when I drove the car, I'm like, yeah, it's a good race car, but man, is it difficult to drive. It's just, I can't be aggressive with it. I can't drive it. And Road America, I drove the wheels off and it would take it. So it's amazing. We found that setup. We got the car in a window, and now I can put my elbows up and drive it any way I want. And it's what's cool about this sports car is, yes, it's a sports car and it's heavy. I drive it just like I would drive a Formula car. To give you some insight into this, and this is what I find mind-boggling at Road America, is at Road America and turn 5, which is the major brake zone down the hill of the big straight. In an Indy Pro car, I brake at about the 3 board in qualifying. And in the Carrera Cup in qualifying, and not just qualifying, throughout the race, I was in the 2 board, like got down to the 2 board, waited till the car passed the 2 board before I would hit the brakes. And you're hitting the brakes at, 15, 16, 17, 1,800 pounds, which is very comparable to what I would hit the brakes in a lights car or an Indy Pro car. Unbelievable. It is a cool car to drive. The ABS system Bosch has done.
Is that the biggest change from the 991 to the 992, the braking? And you're saying the braking's everything, right? And then now you're saying the big difference between 992 and 991 is braking. So now you're saying it's worlds better.
Yeah, no, I have to say, I mean, there's a lot of other reasons why it's better. The 2 biggest single reasons, they changed the geometry of the cars a lot in the wheelbase of the car. So this 992 does not have the dreaded Porsche push, as I like to call it, which is essentially engine in the rear, all the weights in the rear. It gets to the middle of the corner, it pushes, and then it decides to snap on you whenever it hooks up. This car does not have that. It is a very well-balanced race car. And then not only that, because it's so well-balanced, we're not trail braking all the time like I was in the 991.2. That was the only way I could turn that car, was you literally had to run, we're talking a good amount of brake pressure on the car, almost all the way till you touch the throttle past the corner. You would stay on the brake. Where this 992, how I was driving it, Road America, now that we've got it in a window, was driving it just like I drove a Formula car, which is
wow.
A lot of the times, if you needed the little extra rotation and the car was pushy, you could trail the brake a little bit, but it was, for the most part, dump the brake, grab the throttle. And
do you ever get a chance to drive street cars on the racetracks?
That was the second part of your question.
Yeah.
The only one I've got to drive is a Porsche GT3. So
the 991.
Yes. Yeah. So it's fun. It's a street car. Obviously you've got to treat it. It wasn't on slicks. It was on street tires, although they were good street tires. It's different, so I'll be honest, I've never got behind the wheel of a street car that I owned that I was comfortable driving to the 10/10 degree of what I did. Usually the owner or the client is sitting next to me and I'm going, hey, this is your car. Number one, I don't want to crash it. But number two, it's not even about crashing. It's just about driving it hard, right? I want to make sure he can drive it home and the brakes aren't warped and and the car is in perfect working order. So
right. Yeah.
I think I'll go one up on you and say that driving that car in the street is a blast. Not because I was driving it, racing it. Just you get up to 3rd gear off the light and it's such an enjoyable, the sound, the everything, the looks you get. It was pretty cool. And the steering wheel, the seat, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's pretty neat.
It's the best. That's why we're all part of this club, right?
Yeah, no, and
Uh,
like I said, I'm not just biased on that. I've driven Lamborghinis, I've driven, different stuff that I've had, and don't get me wrong, they're all cool. If somebody said, "Hey, here's the keys," I probably would not say, "Oh, I can't get in that because it's not cool enough." It's plenty cool enough. It's just, it's not a Porsche.
Yeah. All right. So I have one other question. Favorite series, like, in terms of you've competed in many series, right? Carrera Cup, Indy Series, Canadian Touring Car, like all these different series. Was there like a favorite series, like most competitive, or like just like the differences between the different series? And then the second question of that is, where are you going? Like, are we going to see you at the Rolex 24, or like where do you want to go with this whole driving career?
Perfect. I'll answer them in order this time, and I'll try and get them done shorter so we don't forget. I'm not going to play favoritism over series. I think IMSA does a really good job. I think IndyCar do a really good job. Two different demographics, two different fan bases. Yes, you get some crossover, but what I will say is 2018, I raced in what was called Pro Mazda. So when I refer to Indy Pro 2000, it's a little confusing for everybody on here and everybody who's a Road to Indy fan. Indy Pro 2000 is the new name of Pro Mazda. So the first year in 2018 that I raced in the series, I raced in Pro Mazda. It was the last year of the Mazda scholarship and sponsorship. My second and third year in the series, it was called Indy Pro 2000, just to clarify for everybody. So 2018 Pro Mazda, we had Oliver Askew, Rinus VeeKay, Scott Harrington. There were some other guys. So Scott Harrington was a F3 European champion. You had Oliver Askew, you had Rinus VeeKay, who were both IndyCar guys. You had just a stacked field. Any given weekend, any of us could have won. And it was I say this, it's sweet and bitter at the same time, because I led the whole championship until the last two races. We had a motor let go, and that's racing sometimes. But that was my favorite championship battle. It was the most that I was enthralled in. I led the championship pretty well the whole way through. And you were beating guys that were, I think that's the best competition that I've ever been up against. And, those guys we've all made a name for ourselves in different avenues of motorsports. Second part of your question, which is where I want to go. I'll give you some background and some insight. I mean, I grew up an IndyCar fan as a kid. Like, that was what my dad and I did on weekends, was watch IndyCar races. He was really interested. He watched NASCAR. He watched anything with motors. I guess I took a liking to the open wheel stuff, and that's where we fell on IndyCar. It was easier to watch when I was growing up because it wasn't big time changes, but watched Formula One, watched it all. And from an early age, especially when I got in karts, that's what I had my target set on. But that gets us into what we've already kind of brushed in this meeting, which is, it is so tough. It's not just talent anymore. And it never has been. I mean, if you watched Rush, you saw that Niki Lauda, multiple time world champion, he took a loan out to fund his first couple of years in Formula One. It's been like that for a long time. It takes a lot of money to get those opportunities and get those shots. And it just didn't line up for me for getting to Formula cars at that time. But what did line up was falling in love with sports car racing. And honestly, the more I got into it, the more I look at Daytona and I look at Le Mans, and I'm going, that is the hardest race in the world to win. Like, that's, don't get me wrong, the Indy 500, I believe, is very tough. But when you look at those races, when you look at versus the variables in a sports car race, you've got, I believe in IMSA, they're sitting at 30 plus manufacturers that race throughout an IMSA weekend, not just in WeatherTech, but in all the different divisions of IMSA. That's where I feel like a career can be healthy and a career can be made. And I've fallen in love with it. So when you ask me where I'm headed to, we're going to see where this Porsche ride takes me. Obviously, the goal right now is at the end of the year, they're going to choose one of 5 Porsche North America juniors. So that's what I'm dubbed as now, as a Porsche North America junior. It's not just the guy who wins the championship, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's kind of the guy who wins this championship. I think they're going to send off for consideration in Europe. They'll go up against all the other Carrera Cup. So you've got Deutschland, you've got Britain, you've got all these different Carrera Cups around the world. They get about 10 juniors together, and then it's literally like a gladiator battle for a couple days. They put us all out on track and they picked the best one out of that. So it's literally, I mean, you think about how hard it is. One point I want to make about this whole thing and what I've learned in my career is, don't get me wrong, it's hard to get to IndyCar. It's more money than talent, I would say, to get your foot in the door. But sports cars, you can't buy rides on Porsche. You can't buy rides with these manufacturers. You can buy rides on the customer teams for GTD, but the drivers in GTLM are generally guys like me who have forged a way through motorsport and have done battle with all of the best sports car drivers and gotten that one paid opportunity. So it is incredibly difficult. So that's what I've got my sights set on right now, is let's go see where this Porsche ride takes me. Quietly confident you'll see me in GTD or in WeatherTech next year. I've already had a few teams call about it. So I think I can say that that'll be an opportunity that I'll hopefully get to enjoy next year.
Nice.
And then where the world takes me, I'm not sure. Obviously, I think with LMDH coming out, my Formula Car background might pay some dividends later in my career, because you've got a bunch of manufacturers that want guys that haven't driven just your tin top or your GT cars, that have also had that Formula Car experience to do the prototypes. So I'm happy with where my career is actually headed. Big thanks to Jeremy Dale at JDX Racing. He there's a whole story. You can probably find it somewhere else, because I know we're running short on time. But he was the guy who said, don't throw away your career just because you're after a dream that you can't afford. It's not tough to say that. I just want to be a professional race car driver. I love driving. I love the people I meet. I love the people I work with. And I think that was a really smart decision to get a manufacturer support in Porsche. They're a premier brand, and let's see where it takes me.
Yeah, you're going to be the next Patrick Long, I feel. All right, they're yanking me. One last question, though.
Oh, by all means, it's not my time I'm worried about.
One last question. They're cutting me off, but I got one last question, because many people that are listening are going to Watkins Glen next week. Give us like one or two track tips on how to be fast at Watkins Glen.
Perfect.
All right. And
Super simple. Anytime you think you should go down a gear. So what I'm saying is if you can roll a higher gear in all the corners. Like if you see lights on, as soon as you touch the throttle for your shifts, go up a gear. That will immediately shave off a second in every corner, because it'll naturally force you to roll a little more speed. And really, Watkins Glen, it's just about balancing the roll speed and what you're comfortable with. Second thing is, it doesn't matter how deep you go into the bus stop. It just matters the roll speed and straight your hands over the curbs. Don't hit a curb with wheel in the car. And Watkins Glen is pretty simple.
Other than it puts more energy. I learned something new. It puts more energy in the tire than any other racetrack. And I believe that, because I courted a set of Hoosiers at Watkins Glen. So I believe you when you say that.
No, it is the load, right?
Yeah,
even just the S's, which is in a 992, it's actually flat, which is just mind-boggling how fast it was. The 991.2 through there on new tires was barely, it was a lift, and still hairy. 992 old tires, easy flat. So I know people in some of their cars that I don't think it'll be flat in a street car, if I'm honest, on street tires. So take that one with a little caution.
I love the up a gear. As an autocrosser, I'm always in second gear, and it's like, I feel like I'm going fast. But I'm really not, When I'm in third, I'm always going faster.
Well, we can even talk on that.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. That was actually, so I spent 2 seasons doing autocross while I raced. Love autocross. I think it has 100% of purpose in teaching you how to get close to cones, honestly. Just car awareness and car placement is autocross to a T. But there's some of those tracks, Sebring, I wouldn't say go up a gear, but there's Watkins Glen. I guarantee if you lug one more gear everywhere you think you should be down a gear, it'll be easy time.
Parker, this was awesome. Thanks for indulging all the questions. We really appreciate it. Wish you a lot of luck in your professional career. It's been a real pleasure for us here. Thank you.
Lou, thank you very much. Thanks to the whole club, Ken, Janice, Shannon for organizing this. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
If anybody has any other questions that's on the YouTube chat or in the club, by all means, reach out over social media and generally give me a couple days, but I pride myself on trying to get back to everybody. So if anybody has any personal questions, by all means, just say you were in this meeting and I will make sure to get back to you.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much. Thank you.
Good look at Indy.
Thank you very much. And if
Yeah.
anybody else gets out to a race this year, let me know. Make sure you stop by and say hi.
We hope
That
to
would
make
be
it to
great.
another one. That would be fun.
Awesome.
That would be awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Parker, Lou, Ken, Janice, Rudy, and Nancy, I appreciate it. Next month and the following month, our meetings are going to be in person at the VFW Hall located in Morris Plains. Please check out the website and Facebook page for more details. But thanks, everyone. For those going to Watkins Glen this weekend, be safe and have a great event. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Good job, Lou.
All right. We're good. So we're